have Tina Tchen with us. Ms. Tchen is the Executive Director of the White House Council on Women and Girls and Chief of Staff to First Lady Michelle Obama, who we love. The Council was established through an executive order signed by President Obama in March 2009. At the signing, the President underscored that the purpose of the Council is to ensure that each of the agencies in which they're charged takes into account the needs of women and girls in the policies they draft, the programs they create, the legislation they support. And that the true purpose of our government is, quote, to ensure that in America, all things are possible for all people. Ms. Tchen works tirelessly to advocate for women and children and has utilized her positions to mentor young women and to educate the public about the disparities that women still face in all aspects of life. Today, she will open our forum by discussing the role of women in politics and policy and the important role of power in gender politics. Please join me in welcoming Tina Tchen.
Well, thank you, Jean, for that introduction, and good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to thank Jean for the invitation, for NASW, for really all of the support you have given this administration. I mean, you all have been really right behind us on so many of the initiatives. And on behalf of one of my bosses, Mrs. Obama, I know NASW have been particularly supportive of joining forces. You know, our initiative to serve veterans and military families, with your commitment to make sure that social workers across the country are fully trained and aware of the issues that confront military families. And, you know, that is so important. I was struck this morning at the breakfast table reading today's Washington Post, which has sort of an amazing, very in-depth story about a set of homeless veterans. And, you know, that really evidences the kinds of needs they have beyond just jobs, which we're working really hard on, but the kinds of counseling and support that really social workers are uniquely qualified and skilled to provide. So we want to thank you on behalf of all of my colleagues in the White House and at the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Defense Department to thank you for your service and stepping up to do that. You know, feminization of poverty is a pretty important and timely topic to discuss. You are in Washington at a uniquely important time in this debate. So, you know, I think I'm probably going to switch up a little bit of the topic from what Jean mentioned, because I do want to talk about what's going on right now in the budget process, because, you know, we are really at a juncture, and it's happening right in front of you this week, where two competing visions of our country are laid out. And a lot of what this means on the topic that you are confronting, which is women and girls and how poverty is affecting those families and those individuals, doesn't always cut through the top lines of the news programs, but it's at the core of these two competing visions. And you will see, you know, that Congress is going to debate, you know, the House today is debating and will vote on tomorrow on the Ryan budget, which has one vision for the country. The President has laid out his vision. He has already, just to be clear, when we talk about the deficit and the fiscal situation facing our country, the President already has engaged and made, you know, unprecedented cuts, you know, that and achieve savings and revenue that will reduce, you know, the deficit by $2.5 trillion already. That's what's already in place between the revenue increases, you know, that, you know, canceling some of the high-end tax cuts that we achieved last December, and the other responsible balanced cuts that he's been able to make. And he has a plan, and you can go on our website, I'm not going to go through his whole plan, but we have a plan to achieve $4 trillion in tax savings over the next 10 years in a balanced way, right? In a way, you know, that builds on our future, continues to build and make the investments we need, support those most in need, and importantly, as I'm sure you're going to talk about all day today, with the growing disparity in our country, right, between the haves, actually sort of like the have-a-lots, right? It's not just the haves, it's the have-a-lots, right? And those at the bottom of the income scale, right? And he has said over and over again, we cannot fix our fiscal issues on the backs of the elderly, of the unemployed, of the disabled, of children and women. You know, while those who make millions, you know, continue to have the tax loopholes, you know, oil and gas subsidies, corporate jets without, you know, with tax deductions, you know, that we can't do that. That that's not our vision of America. And I know you're going to have speakers like Heidi Hartman and Gloria Steinem who are going to give you more of the specifics of the economics of what's happening in our economy to women. So what I thought I would do is just give you some of the facts and arm you with the facts of what we've been doing in the administration on these, because I think it's important for you to know it and for you to communicate it to your members, and if you happen to travel to other places in Washington like Capitol Hill to talk about it. I can't tell you to lobby Congress because I come from the White House, but speak about the issues that you know about. So from day one, I mean, the President has really emphasized the need to pay attention to women and girls, and Jean laid out, our executive order creating the Council on Women and Girls, but it's really followed through on all of our policy offices, and especially our economic policies. So the American Recovery Act, you all remember that back in 2009. Now, first of all, contrary to what you may have read, it was a success. It was not something that failed. Heidi, who's sitting right here, could probably explain to you, if you want to see the difference between what it means to invest in an economy and stimulate an economy with government spending, and when you don't do it, you only have to contrast what's happening with our recovery, with what's going on in Europe today. The Recovery Act did things like, include the Making Work Pay tax credit, which we've renewed every year, expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. That's, estimated to keep 5 million women out of poverty. It benefits, overall 15 million, low and moderate working families with children. And the President, as part of the fiscal cliff discussions last December, really secured making permanent the middle class tax relief. It prevented what effect would have been a $2,200 tax increase on a family of four, and extending EITC and CTC. So those are important tax supports. We've supported getting women entrepreneurs into business, so we've expanded the Women's Business Development Centers at the SBA and access to credit for women. And we, after 10 years of waiting for it to get implemented, the Women-Owned Business Federal Contracting Rule that really lets small and medium, women-owned businesses really have a fair shot at getting federal contracts. We made significant investments in Head Start and in Early Start and child care funding. We increased the number of kids in Head Start and Early Head Start by 61,000. And at the same time have been implementing reforms to really improve the quality of the programming there, to make sure that Head Start is a quality program, not just a place for kids to just be parked without getting those important child development needs met. We've expanded Pell Grants. The President has really made making college affordable a cornerstone of his agenda. We have nearly 4 million students who have received Pell Grants since the President took office, and over 2.5 million of them are women. And of course, and you all were very involved in this, the passage of the Affordable Care Act was addressing one of the most critical issues facing low-income women, and that is access to quality, affordable health care. As many as 13 million women who don't have health care today will have access to health care on January 1. I mean, it's incredible to actually think about that, to say that really we are just 9 months away really from 13 million women now uninsured to really have access to that and realize that promise. And tens of millions of women who have insurance coverage now have better health insurance coverage today. So things like having preventive services covered for the first time at no additional fee or cost sharing. So that's services like mammograms, for the first time ever, intimate partner violence screening, and the hotly debated contraception to plug. But also insurance practices that really meant women, under our old insurance system, would fall into poverty. Those are outlawed. So things like not, dropping you from your insurance coverage when you're sick, that can no longer happen. Or if you have a pre-existing condition, either denying you any coverage or causing you, charging you such exorbitant insurance premiums that, as one breast cancer survivor told us when we were debating, and I always talk about her because I remember this so vividly. She stood up and said, in 2009 we were debating this, I'm a survivor of breast cancer. I need to have screenings to see if it'll come back to save my life, but I can't get coverage at a cost that's affordable. It's a choice between a house over my family's head or insurance coverage, and I've chosen to keep a house over my family's head. She's choosing between life and death here, and that shouldn't happen, and it won't happen anymore because of the Affordable Care Act. And we're not stopping there. So as the President announced in the State of the Union, he talked about the fact that there's a basic bargain It says no matter who you are or where you're from, if you're willing to work hard and play by the rules, you should be able to find a good job, secure your community, and support your family. So he's fought for the middle class and made these historic investments I just talked about, and laid out a new agenda, which we've called the Ladders of Opportunity. Ladders of Opportunity for those working hard to make it into the middle class. Now we know this is not a one-size-fits-all, so it's a program that sort of draws upon not-for-profits, local governments, state governments, everyone together. But some of the elements are of, and I'll just go through a few of them so you have the top lines on it. He announced that we are supporting raising the minimum wage to $9 an hour and indexing it to inflation thereafter. The president really believes that if you're working full-time, you shouldn't be raising your family in poverty. Now this is going to benefit women, so we know around 60% of the workers who benefit from a higher minimum wage are women. And contrary to what people would have you believe, very few of them, only 20% or fewer are teenagers. We're not talking about, suburban teenagers who are trying to get this increase. We're talking about working women trying to support a family, on a minimum wage job. That's who we're trying to benefit. And we know that the erosion in the minimum wage has really been a big factor in the inequality that we now see. And it also helps parents. So the average worker who would benefit from a rise in the minimum wage brought home, 46% of her household wages in 2011. So this is working women who are really contributing important income to the income of their entire household. Second thing we're going to do is provide high-quality preschool for every child. Really preschool for all. Because the president knows that for every dollar we invest in an early learning and development program saves $7 down the road. Pretty good return on investment. Save $7 down the road in higher earnings that could yield more revenue, lower government spending on social services and crime prevention. So our plan, builds not only on expanding those through a partnership with all 50 states. That's what we proposed. We want to extend, federal funding for high-quality preschool programs and to provide those to all low and moderate income 4-year-olds from families at or below 200% of poverty. Our proposal. And the Department of Ed would allocate funding to states based on their share of low and moderate 4-year-olds and distribute the funds to local school districts and other partner programs to implement it. And we would also include funds to make sure that, again, like with Head Start and Early Head Start, that these are quality programs. To access the federal funding, we would require that these programs meet quality benchmarks, so that they would meet state-level standards for early learning, have qualified teachers in every classroom, and have a plan to implement a comprehensive data and assessment system of the programs. We want to make sure that we've got well-trained teachers who are paid comparable to K-12 teachers, that you have small class sizes and low adult-to-child ratios, and comprehensive health and related services for these programs. And not only, are we talking about, pre-K for kids, we also want to expand early childhood programs, because we know that kids, this is really something that's got to start at birth. You've got to do early childhood begins right from birth. So we want a program that will line up and really provide, universal care, good education for kids from birth to age 5 and then on through K-12. So we want to make investments in Early Head Start and our Child Care and Development Fund to sort of support those services and boost our care. We also want to expand our voluntary home visiting, because we know our youngest at-risk children and parents need, sometimes those supports. So this is right up your lane with, home visits from nurses and social workers and other professionals. So we want to expand that home visiting program that's been actually a cornerstone of some of the investments we've made throughout. He wants to continue his commitment to support, healthy marriages by removing deterrents for low-income couples to get married, to support the critical role that fathers play. As someone, he speaks about this a lot, as someone who grew up without a father, the president, understands and believes in making investments where we can to keep families whole. At the same time, we're making critical investments and have always supported, expansions and support for making sure that where families are broken and where things like domestic violence occurs, that we are making important supports in domestic violence programming and our shelters. And I sort of can't deviate I can't, because I can't stand up here and go without mentioning the fact that one of our best moments happened 2 weeks ago when the President was able to sign the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. The wonderful, I think, statement of the administration that our first big bill signing in the administration back in 2009 was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, and our first big bill signing for the second term was the Violence Against Women Act. So I'm very proud of that. And finally, we are partnering with communities. So the President has laid out a new, program to address communities at risk. His view is a child's zip code should never determine her destiny. But today we know that there are many neighborhoods where kids live really impacts, the kinds of the quality of their schools, the quality of the neighborhoods, and the quality of their entire lifetime of economic opportunities. So we want to align the programs that we've got invested across our federal government, whether it's in justice or commerce or education, health and human services, housing and urban development, and put them together in partnership with mayors. So we've done that already with our $350 million investment we've already made in our Promise Neighborhoods program, our Choice Neighborhoods program, and our partnership with cities like San Antonio in our Strong Cities, Strong Communities programs. And put those together in a Promise Zone overall umbrella where we can make targeted investments in high poverty communities to create jobs, to address violent crime, to transform high poverty neighborhoods by making HUD investments in low-income housing and attract private investment to build and increase the housing stock and invest in those schools. So we will continue to be working in those areas. And then also we're going to remodernize and change our high schools. Arnie Duncan's done amazing work with Race to the Top, but we know that too many of our high schools still really don't address the real world needs of our kids or the challenges that they're confronting. So we want to set up a challenge that really creates high schools that will address real world living. So those are the things that are on our agenda and what we're trying to put forward and what the President will be proposing in the 2014 budget, what you'll see us developing as policies as we roll out, doing as much as we can by executive action as well, since we can't always count on things getting through Capitol Hill. And that's the point I want to close on, because as I said at the beginning, you are here at a time when there's two competing visions for our country out there being debated. So just a word or two about the other side, the other vision. The other vision is going to get voted on tomorrow. The House of Representatives is going to vote on Congressman Ryan's budget for the country, and his vision, includes no tax reform, so no revenue, nothing that will. So you all will understand this. I have a little, 55-year-old moment. But his vision does nothing to address closing tax loopholes, so there's no revenue. All of his deficit reduction savings are from drastic, draconian, across-the-board cuts in federal programming, and not in the defense budget, which I think he increases. So it's really going to affect exactly the population you're going to talk about all day today. So it does things like cut health and nutrition. So he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act. So all of the benefits I talked about earlier on the Affordable Care Act would go away. That causes 50 million Americans to lose their health care coverage. He also wants to continue, we included, because we believe there will be a savings, from implementing the Affordable Care Act so that you can reduce, the Medicaid budget by $760 million without affecting benefits. He nonetheless repeals the Affordable Care Act, so he doesn't achieve those cost savings, but still keeps $760 million cut in Medicaid. And that actually means that 21 million low-income Americans will lose benefits. He wants to repeal the closing of the donut hole, which, as you know, has already saved 6.1 million seniors, approximately $5.7 billion. He wants to undo that. His cuts would probably mean 230,000 children would get dropped from Head Start. He'd eliminate mandatory funding for Pell Grants, and he would freeze the grant at current levels. We have implemented changes to the Pell Grant that have an index to rise with inflation, and he would eliminate that. He'd cut WIC. He would block grant SNAP. When you block grant SNAP, either that means dropping 8 million currently eligible households, or if you apply the cut across the board, it would mean a 14% cut in SNAP benefits meaning like a family of 4 would lose $1,000 in SNAP benefits. And these are families, as we know, already can't make it through the month on the benefits that they've got. He cut child care, meaning roughly half the participants in child care right now, or 800,000 children, would lose support. He cut senior Meals on Wheels program, and he cut housing assistance, so that we'd have tens of thousands of low-income families, who would no longer, have supported housing, and some housing vouchers or any support for their housing. So that's their vision for America. So in closing, we've laid out, I wanted to take that time. All of that sort of detailed information is available on whitehouse.gov. So if you go to whitehouse.gov, you will see various fact sheets, both about the President's Ladders of Opportunity that he announced in the State of the Union, information, about how his plan for deficit reduction in the long term, responsible, balanced budget plan that continues to make these investments in families and children and our future, and some of the impact on what these competing visions are. So I'd encourage you to go to that. I would really encourage you to do what you're doing today, which is to learn about these issues, get well armed on them, and then talk about them. Because what we really need everyone to do is break this bubble, of news that kind of gets sucked in and stuck here, and people across the country don't really understand what's happening to them. They see long lines forming at the airport. They see, poverty increasing in the neighborhoods. They don't understand that what's happening right now in Washington is a debate to address those issues that really affect them. So you are the messengers. They won't necessarily believe it when it just comes out of Washington. You're the trusted messengers. Their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues, their counselors, who can give them the information that they need so that they can be engaged in and, help, shape this debate about their future. And so I would encourage you to do that when you go home as well. So thank you very much for inviting me this morning and for, sort of taking in some of this information and listening on it. So thank you very much, Chief.